the other end of the world, to the Arctic, to a speech from Tonje Johansen about wind opposition in the Arctic. Tonje, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you.
Okay, just wait a sec. I have some issues with my computer. I will turn off my video. Wait. Okay, now I can see. So thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Tonje Johansen. I work for the Sami Council. I'm an advisor in the Arctic and Environmental Unit. And I've been invited here today to talk about some wind energy opposition in the Arctic. So I might be one of the more critical voices here today. So you will have to bear with me. I have made a presentation, PowerPoint. So let's see if I am able to share. Yeah, I think this will work. Let's see. Can you see? There you go.
Yeah, maybe you can make it in a full screen.
Oh, you can't see it in a full screen?
No, not yet, not really, but.
Okay, just give me a sec. Oh, okay, this is strange.
Yeah. Maybe you have to change the screen.
How about now?
Oh, much better now.
Okay, good. So I thought I have a suspicion that not many of you who are attending today know who the Sami Council is or who the Sami people are. So I will give a short presentation, talk a few points about who we are and what my organization do. And if you already know about us, just bear with me. So the Sami Council is a voluntary Sami organization. We have Sami member organizations in Finland, Russia, Norway, and Sweden. And it was founded in 1956, and the Sami Council has actively dealt with Sami policies tasks since this time. And we are one of the oldest indigenous peoples organizations that are still existing. So the primary aim of the Sami Council is the promotion of Sami rights and the interest in the 4 countries where the Sami people are living. And the main task of the Sami Council is to consolidate the feeling of affinity among the Sami people and to attain recognition for the Sami as a nation and to maintain the cultural, political, economic, and social rights of the Sami. The Sami Council is a permanent participant in the Arctic Council, and we work actively within the UN system with the United Nations Framework, Convention on Climate Change, and Convention on Biological Diversity. Let's see if I can change. Yeah. So who are the Sami people? So the Sami people, as I already mentioned, we live in 4 different states. In the northern parts of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the northwest part of Russia on the Kola Peninsula. A different energy situation than other indigenous peoples in the Arctic. We are connected to the national energy grid, and most of the energy produced, particularly in the Finnish Scandinavia, is already sort of green. And in Norway, where I'm from, hydro energy is very dominant. The Sami people are internationally and nationally recognized as indigenous peoples, and we are protected under the ILO 169 Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And we have collective rights as a people, and this includes rights to land, right to practice our culture and languages. So as a people, we are quite diverse. We live in our traditional homelands, in our villages, and we also live in more urban areas. We have higher education, we work in governmental institutions, we are entrepreneurs, and we're fishers and reindeer herders. Our traditional livelihoods, such as reindeer husbandry, subsistence fishing, hunting, trapping, and gathering, and a combination of all of these are still essential to the economies of the Sami culture. So yeah, that is us. And we have a bit of a different experience with wind energy projects than perhaps other indigenous people have. So yeah. And then this is something that I sort of always start with when I talk about wind energy projects or other resource projects, and that is that the Arctic is not empty. This is actually our home. And we have, during the last 20 years or so, experienced sort of an avalanche of new license application for wind energy, in particular in Norway and Sweden. And many of them have been built, and many have been built on our traditional homelands, the pasture land of our reindeers. We are experiencing that our use of the land is not recognized and is not respected, even though the nature we manage looks empty and unused to others. It is not empty. It is used frequently by us in a sustainable manner, and it is our culture to leave the place in the same condition as it was when we arrived. We do not want to leave big traces of ourselves in the nature. It is not ours to take, and it's supposed to be there for generations, not just our kids, but for many, many generations. Even though the Arctic and the European Arctic may look empty to some eyes, it looks like a nice place to build industry. It is not. It is our home, and we will fight for its existence. And the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services released their global assessment in May 2019. And their message was pretty clear. Nature and nature's contribution to people are vital for our existence and for the good quality of life. And it's vital for for us as a global community to also achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the assessment also found that nature in general is declining less rapidly on land used by indigenous peoples than on other kinds of lands. But it also warns that nature managed by indigenous people is under increasing pressure. And for me and for my people, it's very clear that the massive degradation of nature, for instance, like giant wind energy industries demand, is not the solution for the climate crisis. And the Sami Council stresses that any industry project on Sami land needs to be developed based on the concept of free, prior, and informed consent. And it needs to be based on local communities' needs. And this sort of leads me to my next point. Because since I have been invited here to talk about wind opposition in the Arctic, one of the reasons why, in particular in my part or our part of the Arctic, why there is such an opposition against it, it's sort of the wind energy companies' own fault. They have managed to create, or it is their own fault, but they have managed to create a very bad reputation for themselves. Our experience is that free, prior, and informed consent does not exist in their vocabulary. And it is not our local communities nor the Sami society as a whole needs or best interests that are the driving force for the projects that we experience here. We also experienced that the argument of the need for a green shift in order to save the climate, that this is just an argument in order to get the concession from the government. The real driving force in our eyes is big money. And this becomes very clear when we see how the wind industry operates in our local communities when they try to lobby for the projects, and also what happens afterwards when they have gotten their concessions. Their tactics are, as written, divide and conquer. Facts are not important when they are trying to win over the local people. Some reindeer herders are offered big money at the expenses of their neighbor herders, and as a result, the bigger Sami family is torn. Those who are not reindeer herders are offered other compensations in order to turn their back to their Sami brothers and sisters who are dependent on the land in order to have a healthy herd. Deals are made in the back room, and promises to come up with good solutions for the reindeer herders are made. But when the concession is given, the company is sold, new owners arrive, promises to ease the burden for the reindeers and their herders are forgotten. And as I mentioned before, we are not off-grid as many other indigenous peoples in the Arctic are. We do not use diesel for energy. So who are benefiting from these massive nature degradations? Whose needs are we filling by giving up our land? It is certainly not ours. So perhaps the big question is if wind industry and reindeer herding can coexist. My main answer is no, not as it is in Scandinavia today, at least. And I understand that I'm sort of talking about a bit different scale of the wind industry than what is being talked about at this conference. But our experience is with the large wind energy projects with many turbines, which are, they're on the largest side of the scale. So the projects that are happening here are too massive. They demand too much land, they make too much noise, they cast too much shadow, and they force the reindeers out of their natural pastures. And the reindeers, and these are the projects that are causing a lot of distress and anger and opposition in my community or in my society. The reindeers need big areas. It's in a harsh climate as it is in the Arctic, the animals and the herders are dependent on the flexible pastures. And if the pastures are locked by ice in the winter, they need to find other areas during the winter. The female reindeer needs peace when she's giving birth to her calf in the summertime or in the springtime. And the wind energy projects are eating up our homeland. They are eating up the land of our animals. And we do not have much more land to give. So if you look at this map, you will see the loss of wilderness in Norway and how it has developed until 2018. And it is what our government call wilderness that our reindeers are so dependent on to survive. And the Sami culture is balancing on the verge of extinction in many areas. We do not have any more land to give. And indigenous cultures are actually the safeguards of nature, and that should not be an element of trade-off. So returning to my question, if we can coexist with wind energy. As I have seen here today, as I already mentioned, we're sort of not talking about the same sizes of wind turbines. And I'm really have been following today's discussion, and I see that there are many good projects out there with and I really appreciate the smaller ones that are also taking the local community's needs and trying to solve, in particular, those indigenous communities or societies where they are dependent on diesel energy. But for this to be a solution or an option in the Sami part of the Arctic, any industry project that is going to be developed on our land needs to be based on a local community's needs, not on the industry's needs. And I think in general that any energy project needs to be located and built and close to already existing industry or close to already existing establishment or villages or cities, because that's where the demand is. And by doing so, we can avoid splitting up the land more than necessary. And also, the Sami Council also stresses that, yes, it needs to be based on local communities' needs. And that is also why it needs to be locally owned. If not, we risk, as we have already seen in Sami land, that there are international big industry companies coming in, buying up the land or buying up the concessions. And they do not have any of the same relationship with nature or the community, or understand the need that we have they do not have this knowledge that we do, and they do not know what we need. And I frankly don't think that that's in their main interest to learn or to know either. So there is not only the wind energy that is threatening to the Sami culture, it's also many other things. It's the cumulative effects of wind energy projects, mines, cabin projects, of people building their cabins everywhere, new roads. Any sort of development is putting a lot of stress and pressure on the land that we have, but also on our people. It's putting an immense pressure on the reindeer herders, on them personally, their economy, their mental health, and their families. So the opposition in the Arctic, and in my society in particular, is that the wind industry is coming on top of everything else. And it's and since the large wind industry projects are demanding so gross for such large areas, those are eating away of our land, and it's making it unbearable for many of our people. So just to end my presentation, I don't think I have talked that long, but anyways, I would just end to say that we need nature. Nature is the basis of our culture. Nature is the basis of our existence, not just as indigenous peoples, but also as the human people, as humans in general. And the solution is not to take out or to build on these massive land areas in order to save the climate, when the loss of land turns to loss of biodiversity, and the loss of biodiversity leads to a loss of food source. So yeah, I think I will end it there, and perhaps you will have some questions for me. Yeah, I think I will end it there, that we need nature, and we need it for not just ourselves, but for our future generations and for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Tonje. That's really interesting. Well, I'm situated in Denmark, and we also in Denmark need acceptance from the public for the citizens for very big wind turbines. We used to have it with the small wind turbines. Do you think that small wind might have a better chance in Sami land? And if so, what are the steps to follow up that the Sami rights are respected?
I think smaller wind projects, and then they need to be, let me just underline this, they need to be much smaller than the project that we are experiencing here in Sapmi, our traditional homelands, could perhaps be possible if they are based on local communities. But as I said again, the Sami population in general, we are already connected to the grid, and a lot of the energy that is produced on our land is not consumed here, it's consumed elsewhere. It's sent off to more energy demanding areas. So it's not our need that we are filling, it's someone else's need. So right now, right now, I don't see the need to build more wind energy or energy projects in general on Sami land, because we are not consuming that much energy. But in order to come back to your question, how the Sami rights can be fulfilled and also build green energy, because don't misunderstand me, the Sami people is also very keen on the green energy shift. We also need the shift because we are also we are heavily influenced by the climate change. But it needs to happen. The green shift cannot happen by turning into a burden, because we are already carrying the burden of the climate change. And if we are also going to carry the burden of stopping the climate change, then we have a double burden, and there is not a lot of, without us even being the source of the climate change. And in order to protect and make sure that the Sami indigenous rights are being upheld in these projects, we need to follow the concept of free, informed, prior and informed consent. That's the baseline of how to make sure that our rights are being upheld. So I don't know, maybe that was not your answer, but or what you wanted to hear, but that's our stance on this today. And I must say that we have the Sami people and many of our, in particular those who are involved in the reindeer herding communities, are fighting for their rights. They're fighting for the land through court case after court case. And there is, even though it's very resource demanding, there is a will among the Sami people to take these cases that we do not see, or that we see, that we feel and see that are violating our rights. There is a will to take these to the court, and not just the national courts, but also internationally. So the opposition is quite vast in the Sami society at this moment.
Well, I didn't expect a special answer from you, but well, I just want to inform you that normally small wind are owned by private or by small communities, and normally the highest of the small wind is 80 meters, but normally will be about 20 to 40 meters. So it's not very much, and a lot of them can support maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4 families and whatever, but it is normally owned by the locals. And it is also off-grid, which is might be. I know that in Russia they are working a lot about the off-grid systems, because there's a need for them. Today they have generators with diesel and so on, and they want to have to change. But it might be a possibility as well in Samiland.
Of course, and as I said, that we have a different experience and a different energy situation than other indigenous peoples in the Arctic have. Other indigenous peoples in the Arctic are more welcoming to wind energy, and they are also seeking it because they, as you said, they are off-grid, and many of them are reliant on diesel energy, which is definitely not a good solution to their energy need. So for us, it's very positive that they are locally owned. If there's going to be any wind energy in indigenous people's land in general, not just the Sami land, but in general, the Sami Council stresses that they need to be locally owned, and it needs to be it's also needs to be based on the local communities and local people's needs. And I think that if they are actually based on what the local community needs, you will have a much more positive, much more positive attitude towards wind energy. And if they are also, you know, if the local community can also themselves sort of limit the height and the length of the turbines, because that's become a problem in Sápmi, that the wind turbines that are built, or not just in Sápmi but in Norway in general, that they are becoming larger, they're becoming higher, wider, and it's turning into huge industry areas. But as you said, I'm positive towards that it's the local community who is owning it, and and of course, if there's an off-grid community, definitely that would be a solution that they could look upon to see if that would help them have a more healthy environment around them, because a diesel aggregate is definitely not a very good solution. But again, the Sami people are in a different situation than other indigenous peoples, because we most of us are on grid. Like the majority of us, if not everyone, is on grid. So smaller wind turbines might be used in the cabins or in the herder cabins when they are migrating. That could be a good solution for those who are, because we are also modern people. We also need energy for our phones and etc. Even though we are in nature, I'm sure that there are many people who also would like to have the battery on their phone. So, and I know that there are people from my community who do have small on their cabin or herder cabin that is off grid, and for sure that could be a solution for their needs. But again, it's our experience is with the large wind energy projects, and our experience is very negative, unfortunately.
Well, I fully understand you, and we have seen it in Denmark. So now more or less all wind is offshore wind today, because it is not getting the public acceptance, or it is utilities who owns it. So there's no citizens who actually can say yes or no to anything in it. So, but anyhow, you're drawn the attention to Sami, and I'm sure that there are somebody around in the conference here who might have some good ideas for you. Are there any questions right now? Otherwise, we'll take up in a panel discussion later on, when we have had the next speaker from Faroe Islands, Bjarni Thompson, and Faroe Islands on their way to 100% renewable energy. But Tonje, thank you very much for your participation until now, and I hope you have time to see more of what is going on here.